can't just assume that our traditional paradigms of teaching the medical knowledge are sufficient.
They've made this conscious decision to go into cardiology, so it's our job to make sure we've taught them all about cardiology has to offer, because some of these fellows will end up in the business world.
Wow, there are ways that we can change things that aren't really very dramatic, just one step at a time.
Welcome to MedAxiom HeartTalk, the podcast where thought leaders come together for one ultimate goal: to continually transform cardiovascular care for all. MedAxiom HeartTalk starts now.
I'm Melanie Lawson, a journalist in Jacksonville, Florida, and host of MedAxiom HeartTalk. In today's episode, we will explore how cardiology fellows are the future and discuss opportunities for enhancing education during cardiology fellowship. And I am thrilled to introduce today's guest. We have Dr. Ami Bhatt, the Chief Innovation Officer of the American College of Cardiology and Associate Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School. For more than a decade, Dr. Bhatt served as the Director of the Adult Congenital Heart Disease Program at Massachusetts General Hospital, the original and largest teaching hospital of Harvard Medical School. Also next, Dr. Doreen DeFaria Yeh is also an adult congenital heart disease cardiologist at Massachusetts General Hospital, where she serves in multiple leadership roles: the Associate Director of the ACHD program, Co-Director of the Cardiovascular Disease and Pregnancy Program, and Program Director of the Cardiovascular Disease Fellowship. Also, you have heard her wisdom on a recent episode. Ana Mercurio-Pinto is VP of Care Transformation at MedAxiom. Before MedAxiom, Ana served as the Director of Cardiovascular Innovation at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Quite a lineup in this podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Bhatt, Dr. DeFaria, and Ana. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Great, thank you.
That was a lot to digest, but there is more about their backgrounds throughout this episode. Also, check out their full bios in the episode notes. Today's guests all have extensive experience and expertise in cardiovascular medicine. All right, so easy question first, if you're ready for it. The first question that we do ask all of our Heart Talk guests: why did you get into healthcare in the first place? And did you ever have an aha moment? Let's start with you, Dr. DeFaria.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with everyone today. Gosh, that's a tough question. I do remember early in college time thinking that I had an affinity for science and human biology, and that led me to some experiences in a hospital as a volunteer, and things moved from there. I will say there wasn't a clear aha moment, but it was an evolution in recognizing that I had this interest in science and in disease and human biology that ultimately transitioned into applying for medical school and beyond. So,
all right, love it. You were sent down the right road, clearly. Dr. Bhatt, tell us what your aha moment, if you had one, or just what motivates you or motivated you to get into this industry.
Yeah, it is a great question, and thanks for having me as well. I think similar to Doreen, I evolved towards it, but probably the most interesting part of, my reflection, you can always reflect, right? You look back and you're like, oh, this is why I think it happened. At the time, I don't think I would have recognized it, is that I really wanted to be able to take care of kind of anyone. It's one of the reasons I went into medicine and pediatrics, which was I just wanted people to be able to walk in the door and for me to be able to help whoever they were. It's funny to start by saying that because both Dr. DeFaria and I went into a rather subspecialty of adult congenital heart disease. We can talk later about subspecialties and fellowship training. But interestingly, I've evolved back out now to join Ana in the innovation and transformation world. Again, thinking about how do we help as many people as we can. So I think that's probably the driving force for me.
All right. Ana, what about you?
So for me, again, there was never an aha moment. It was just, again, right path, right time. Babies came along, threw me for a loop. So thinking, all along, I thought I was going to be in the for-profit investment banking, and that was my life, and then realized it kind of sucked. And just, I happily ended up at Boston Medical Center, and I just knew it was the right place to be, right? I got to run a business, because every single department, subspecialty functions like its own business. But at the same time, we're taking care of people, and the population at Boston Medical Center is an amazing place to take care of people. You really feel like you're doing community service when you're there, and to be in the back end helping the doctors to produce programs for this patient population, to me, it was the perfect place. And I knew I wanted to grow, I needed to expand, I needed to learn more, and then I knew I needed to be in cardiology, because that to me was the backbone of all activity within a hospital. It was a little bit of everything. So the minute I heard of a cardiology opportunity, I jumped ship, because that's where I wanted to be, because I thought I would learn the most of the entire operation.
Now, you did get to cheat a little bit because you've been on the podcast before, so I'd asked you that. So great answer. Standing ovation. I love your passion behind it as well. All right, let's dig in. Dr. DeFaria, I want to start with you. On a recent Heart Talk episode called Best of Both Worlds, we discussed the importance of integrating traditional medicine with innovation, especially regarding fellowship education. So would you agree that change is long overdue?
Oh, certainly that change is very long overdue. There is so much to be taught and to learn in cardiology fellowship in 2023. It is a very different field. It is a field that has much more subfields, nuances, academic avenues, community-based avenues than maybe how we traditionally thought about cardiology years ago. I think one thing that's a challenge is a lot of our training paradigms, how we train cardiology fellows has largely been somewhat stagnant over the years and hasn't evolved in the way that our field has dramatically evolved over the decades. Of course, it will always be critically important for cardiology fellows to know how to manage heart attacks and heart failure and arrhythmias and all of the common things that we do absolutely every day. But we do that in a much more complex medical environment now. See very complex patients that come to the hospital because much of care can be managed outside of the hospital or in the home or in the clinic. Technology has changed dramatically, and we have to change and evolve our training practices to incorporate how technology can help us as doctors and can help our patients. We often talk about how to expand what we call this non-clinical curriculum that Ana has mentioned. Of course, there's all of the clinical competencies and things that doctors need to know in cardiology, but importantly, there is so much of those non-clinical competencies. How to understand the business of medicine, how to understand the environments that our patients live in and the communities that they live in, and the socioeconomic contributions to their care and to their health. How to think about leading and innovating and creating new knowledge and doing new things that advance our career and help us to be better over time. That's a skill set. Leading is a skill set. It's something that needs to be learned and practiced and talked about. So we can't just assume that our traditional paradigms of teaching the medical knowledge are sufficient. They are not. There's so much more that we as educators need to do and think about in training our next generation of leaders if we really care about continuing to move the needle and make our field better.
Dr. Bhatt, you're kind of living in both worlds, so you see this perspective really fully. So from your perspective as a Harvard Medical School professor and the ACC's Chief Innovation Officer, how does innovation play an integral part in this whole education mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the way Dr. DeFaria set up thinking about it is important. When we first started practicing, I may be dating Dr. DeFaria and myself now, but when we first started practicing, a lot of medicine was about knowing, memorizing, having the knowledge, being able to apply it. One of the reasons, and I'll speak for both of us for a second, we both love cardiology and adult congenital heart disease is we think through the physiology. It's not just memorization. It's what's happening in the heart. Well, today it's very different. The amount of data that our fellows need to learn, that any of us need to learn, is so significant that the brain can't actually keep all of it inside and get to it at any time. So what they need to learn now is, how do I get the right data that is important for my patient at the right time? And then how do I use that to better their health? And so that's really trading in systems learning. And that's where innovation comes in. That's where technology and the power of computing says, hey, I see you're doing the following, and I know that all of this data may be relevant to you. what in that data set would you like to use right now to care for your patient? And that could be medical clinical data, that can be basic biology or research studies, but that can also be social determinants of health and other things that you may not recognize about your patient, but that we know. So I think that's where innovation comes in. It's really helping the clinician do the best job they can by taking this data and putting it together for us.
Yeah, it's part of that mindset. I think it has to be in education and innovation tied together. Anna, in your care transformation work with CV programs across the country, are you seeing any organizations that are really hungry for this fellowship education, or is it something you think leaders might need to be made aware of?
I think they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't even realize that they're missing this skill set. But I know that everyone that I've spoken to, once you bring it up, they're like, aha, it's an aha moment. They're like, oh yeah, we don't know about that. We need to know about that. So I haven't had one conversation that has not asked to learn more once I bring it up. And again, it's, most of these folks are so, first of all, they're the smartest people ever, right? And they've been so focused on learning their clinical skills that it's not even crossed their mind until they'll start ready to look for a job, right? And then at that point, it's like kind of almost too late. So for me, it's, it's making people aware of this missing skill set, and then recognizing that they need it, and they quickly put it together saying, oh yeah, I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to be able to look at my offer letter and understand it, right? So for me, it's, really about socializing it. And that's what I've been working on, is socializing it with, not only the directors, but with chiefs, with fellows, with junior faculty. I keep bringing it up, right? In hopes that it creates momentum. And then eventually it's just part of a program.
Yeah, can I jump in on that? So, you said chiefs, Anna, and I think it's a great point. We have a course that we started. This is the initial year at MGH called MGH Elevate, and it's out of the Department of Medicine. And it's actually a course about leadership in times of change. And it's actually taken by chiefs and associate chiefs and directors of programs, because what we realize is we had been doing things in a rather static way, and then there was time for a change. And what we're realizing now is that change is happening almost every day, all the time. And so we can't say, oh, we're going to be static and then we're going to change, and we're going to be static again. A lot of what we do is now continuously leading people through change. And we're not used to that, period, as an industry. And so I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that a lot of leaders recognize that's a skill set we wish we had. That's a skill set that people like Dr. DeFaria are giving to the fellows now. But even those of us in practice, we still need to learn it to be able to do the kind of work we need to do today, because change isn't going to happen later. It's going to happen all the time now.
One of the things that, comes up often, we talk about innovation and we plan for innovation, but that's not really innovation, right? So that's my favorite part, is the talking about it, but not doing anything. So to your point, is recognizing that we need to keep moving every single day a little bit forward in that direction. Because again, it's not waiting for us. We just somehow are just trying to avoid it by talking about it, and recognizing that there's no perfect plan, but it's just a plan of embracing change, right? And I think the leadership course is perfect because it trains people just to think differently and be open-minded about it. And again, that's the plan, to step back and tell fellows, teach them to learn about change and recognize that it's actually our friend. It's not the enemy, it's the friend, right? That we didn't even know we needed.
A friend that we'll get to know more in this conversation as well. I think we've definitely outlined the need, and we'll kind of talk about how to get there. So this is an excellent place to pause for a quick message from our Heart Talk listeners.
You hear the term care transformation a lot, but what does it mean exactly? Care transformation is redefining the way consumers buy and use healthcare by developing new products, treatments, and business models that integrate separate healthcare organizations or activities. MedAxiom understands that moving the needle in CV care is not simple. It takes vision and leadership, and it requires bridging technology, innovation, and care delivery. MedAxiom experts are helping programs across the country shape the future of cardiovascular care delivery. Through education, organizational performance solutions, and advocacy, we are evolving disease management, innovating virtual care, driving the data revolution, and redefining access and team-based care. Let's transform cardiovascular care together. Get started at medaxiom.com/care transformation.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. DeFaria, Dr. Bhatt, and Ana about fellowship education and why change is long overdue. So let's dive a little deeper into this. Dr. DeFaria, when you were a fellow, what is the number one tip you wish somebody would have given you regarding life as a practicing cardiologist?
That's a great question. And I could go on probably for days about all the things I felt I didn't know well enough coming into early faculty time. And I think an important piece there is it's impossible to teach people absolutely everything about not only the clinical parts of cardiology, but also the non-clinical and life skills part about being and attending. So I think there has to be some recognition. We do our best to provide foundations and fundamentals, but learning is always continued into faculty time. But I will say I was really struck when I became an early faculty member. I was working at a practice outside of Boston that was a clinical practice, and I realized I knew absolutely nothing about the business, if you will, of medicine, of what the practice looked like, my contribution, and what that meant. And I recognized this was a huge area of deficit for me that I bought some books and tried to learn on my own. I also really spent a lot of time thinking about, gosh, I just trained, for a lot of years in these great institutions. And importantly, I really want to make an impact in my career and do something that actually changes something about cardiology. And so I made an early transition from this practice back to MGH and into academics, really with the goal of being more involved in training to think about how we can do better. And so I guess those would be the two pieces, really recognizing that there's a whole skill set about being a faculty member, being a member of a group, of a practice, of a community, that are some of those unwritten rules and some actually written rules that we just may not think about. But then also thinking about the skill set that's necessary to make change, even when one has that very, very strong fundamental clinical, all those facts in the brain, that is not enough to be a leader in cardiology and actually move the needle. So those are a few early career reflections.
Yeah, great information. I mean, and a powerful pivot for you to help others as well. Dr. Bhatt, we've discussed how it's the responsibility of future cardiologists to test and integrate innovation into everyday practice, everything they do. So can you share an example of what that actually might look like in practice?
Yeah. I was hoping you'd have me answer Doreen's question, but alas, all right. No.
Well, wait, hold on. We can pause. Please do. Tell us. We'd love to hear from you.
Maybe I'll try and relate those two questions together. So what I was getting ready to say was nobody told me how hard outpatient care is. I had been trained really well in inpatient care, but how hard it is to care for patients when they're in the communities where they live, communicating with you and getting things done for them. I just didn't really comprehend that until I had my own practice. And maybe I'll relate that then to what you're asking, which is, I think that's one of the places where integrating innovations, if you will, or different ways of doing things than the way we used to in the past, right? That's really what innovation is. I think that's where it's the most helpful, helping patients stay in the communities where they live and being able to reach out to them. So Dr. DeFaria and I started many years before COVID sending blood pressure cuffs home to our patients who had hypertension or our pregnant patients who might be at risk of high blood pressure in pregnancy. And just starting to think about what are the kind of things that we can do in our relationship with a patient where they just don't need to be side by side with us. And I think that was one of the first times I saw innovation in practice that gave me some hope that, wow, there are ways that we can change things that aren't really very dramatic, but again, just one step at a time in the direction of change.
I can attest to the fact that Ami was doing televisits and virtual care far before the pandemic, where it became a necessity and certainly now a really important part of our care. So I'll highlight her really innovating in that way and bringing it to her own clinical practice.
Nice to have that cosign. Thank you so much. Ana, let me bring you in. We know medical schools aren't really talking about the business side of this? Are there ways that CV organizations can kind of reconcile this? And what are some of the must-learn topics you think a fellowship education program should offer?
Yeah, those are lots of great questions there. So just to add to, Ami and Doreen, it's the future, right? Taking care of patients every day, not just when they come in to see you. So I think that's part of the, business education, part of the innovation is making it part of your practice every day. And I think from the business program that we're trying to build is talking about that, right? It's first of all, how do you manage your own operation, give you the docs, these new cardiologists who are out practicing the tools to advocate for themselves, right? How do you propose new technology? Well, you need to have some business understanding of how to do that. So that's our job, right? Is to teach them compensation models. Like, you're working really hard, but we don't want to make you work harder. We want to make you work smarter. So what does that mean? Traditional medicine, people tend to hold on to their patients forever. And it's a subspecialty in cardiology. You really can send them back to their primary care. And it's actually what you should do, so you can make room for new patients, so you can take care of a broader population of people that need you. So it's teaching doctors about this, right? About how the finances work, teaching them how to bill properly so that their efforts are measured. So they can, at the end of the year, meet with their chief and meet with their administrator and say, look, this is what we've done. This is where we need to be. How do I get there? So, it's arming them with the right jargon, compensation models, understanding the value of an RVU, why, unfortunately, we still work, why we still need to know about the RVU. And then as MedAxiom, as a community, as a membership organization, is teaching them, hopefully, the value of different compensation models, right? The service line, dyad leadership structures, and hopefully moving away from an RVU model and teaching them more about value-based care. So I think we need to do this as a community. It doesn't just work when it comes from MedAxiom, but when it's taught through your fellowship program, it becomes just the normal way of doing business. When you're teaching it from your faculty's teaching it and they're modeling it, right? I don't know. I'm hoping cardiology is changing every single day, as Ami started. The trends, it's amazing, and it's very difficult to keep up. But part of this program too is to bring fellows up to date in trends that are happening, right? The surgical centers, all the private equity that's coming into it. It's not just regular basic bread and butter. And I don't want to say primary care is basic, but it's very different from primary care. And they've made this conscious decision to go into cardiology. So it's our job to make sure we've taught them all about cardiology has to offer. Because guess what? Some of them won't be practicing. Some of these fellows will end up in the business world, right? So it's hoping that they go into it armed. So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping, all these little tidbits of jargon make them more knowledgeable and ask better questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this next quote that I'll ask you about is going to punctuate much of what we've talked about. So looking at a 2022 paper published in the National Library of Medicine titled "The Science of Learning and Art of Education in Cardiology Fellowship" concluded this: advances in the science of learning provide a wealth of opportunity to enhance education during cardiology fellowship. When education is done well, the acquisition of cardiac knowledge is more consistent and efficient, benefiting not only the fellows, but also what I hear all of you saying are the patients, benefiting the patients as well. So let's do a round robin. What is your reaction to that statement? Dr. DeFaria, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think we can't assume that teaching and educating for people in their early mid-30s who are adults with so much else going on in life is the same as teaching, say in a younger age range or elementary school. We can't assume that telling people things will mean that they will internalize it, utilize it. So educating has to be a very active process, a process with purposeful redundancies and sort of intense experiences. But importantly, there has to be something that is tangible at the end of the day that people walk away with that really improves what they can do for our patients. So there's just so much, we have a long way to go, and I think in leveraging technology in education and cardiology fellowship education, but the upsides and the benefits are so tremendous. We really have to. There is no option to just maintain the status quo of, what we've been doing for years. So
talk about a long way to go in technology that is always changing. So even the walk is going to be even farther. Ana, let me ask you, what's your reaction to that statement?
So I guess, the different learning models, I think this is our opportunity to, what they're learning and to apply it to practice, right? Is to make that crossover, those actual tangible examples of what they learn and how it applies to them and how it applies to their, the community, their patients, their paycheck, and tie it all together for them. And hopefully it sinks in, right?
All right, Dr. Bhatt, I'll leave you with the last thought on this quote, talking not just about the fellows, but also how this is benefiting the patients, which I know is you all's real focus.
Yeah. I 100% agree with Dr. DeFaria and Ana. I think looking forward, one of the things that we recognize is I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the Ether Dome for just a second. We come from MGH, so I get to do this, right? It was an amphitheater where people would watch how other people did surgery because that was how we had to learn. And if you look forward to today, there are all sorts of benefits to different ways of learning. One of the things that we're recognizing is if you look at our Instagram feed today, boy, Instagram, TikTok, pick what you will, it is able to know what I like, what I don't like, what I might need to be able to get more of, right? And it's also defined how a generation of people today take in information, which is very fast, very quick, just what they need right at the point that they want to consume it and moving on. So I think as we continue to do some things in person, like Ether Dome style, you want to be there in an operating room learning to do a surgery. As we want to follow someone like Dr. DeFaria on the wards with her as our attending, because we learn from how she interacts with patients, we also want to make sure that we are feeding our clinicians the right information at the right time in a way that they can harness it and then immediately use it for their patients. And that's the right thing for our patients too, right? And so how do we generate just-in-time information? It's something that we're working really hard at the ACC. And then the second is, how do we use some of these videos and other things that we have to say, hey, you're learning all of this. I see this might be interesting. I'll give you more of it. But also, I noticed that when you do these kind of questions, you're not really able to do it as fast, as well, get as many right. Let's teach you some more about that. And that is all the kind of analytic technology that we have today that we're just learning how to apply better to our existing systems.
Yeah, really, it requires harnessing everything, people, the AI, the technology, and really harnessing it and using it well. This has been a wonderful conversation. I want to let everyone have last words if they want. Anything else that you would like to add?
Great. I'll just say thank you so much for opening this conversation. I really do hope that there are a lot of program directors out there and chiefs of divisions out there and admin leaders out there, managers who really kind of internalize the need for us to change and evolve as we think about training. It takes an investment not only in our sort of time and energy, but it takes an investment from a whole division to really do different. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about how we can actionize, I guess, if you will, sort of that doing different process. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dr. Bhatt, you want to chime in?
Sure. So first of all, thank you. This has been great. I think second of all, I love that you put the three of us together in one conversation, because you have to take people who are master educators and understand what the process is like and what people need to know. And then you need to combine them with people who are willing to say, this is how we're going to change and this is how we're going to do things differently. And I understand where you come from and what we need to do for our clinicians and our patients. But at the same time, if we don't change, we're not going to be as good as we want to be. And then finally, you need people like Ana who say, and we're going to operationalize it. We're going to take the basics of what you do, the ideas of how it can be better, but then we're going to be able to actually create a model out of it, a viable business model to make these changes happen, to both make the experience of being a clinician even better, which we can do, and most importantly, helping our patients.
All right, I love it. And it's been wonderful having the three of you here to give these perspectives. Definitely food for thought. We're not just going to talk about it. We're going to be about it. Sounds like that's where we're moving in the future. So that's it for this episode. So if you liked it, please tell your colleagues and let them know they can subscribe to MedAxiom HeartTalk on Apple, Google, or wherever they get their podcast. If you'd like to send us a note or even suggest a topic, please email us at hearttalk@medaxiom.com. Thanks so much for listening.